Welcome to another edition of Women's Wrestling Weekly, the show. It's the post NCWWC edition, joined as always by Scott Beck. Scott, we are at the end of an era. The final National Collegiate Women's Wrestling Championships took place in Coralville, Iowa. Next season, it will be the NCAA Championship. So started in 2020, sixth one in 2025. University of Iowa defeated North Central by 20 and a half points. But for me, the story of the tournament is the fans. Of course, you know that when you have it in Coralville, Iowa, at Extreme Arena, you're going to get a great fan base. But Simpson College in Indianola, Iowa, coached by Jeff McGinnis, former University of Iowa two-time NCAA champion, brought a great crew, had them up in a suite, had about 60 people there. And what's neat about that is Jeff McGinnis's sister passed away several years ago, and he got into this coaching gig because of that to honor his sister.
She was a huge influence in my life. She was always my biggest supporter. Throughout my entire high school and college career, there was a poem that she had given to me when I was a freshman before I wrestled my first match, and it lived in my headgear my entire high school and college career. It was one of those things that I read before I went out. She passed away unexpectedly, and it was one of those eye-opening experiences that the path or journey that I was on wasn't. I liked what I was doing, but I didn't love it like the way that I love what I'm doing now. And just being able to provide mentorship beyond just coaching has been a benefit for me, right? It's rewarding for me. We want to win and we want to do those things, but we want them to be successful. We want them to grow as individuals, and seeing that growth and utilizing the skills that either my coaches taught me or my parents instilled in me, and certainly the relationship I had with my sister has been fundamental to that.
So what a neat way and what a neat tribute to be able to do that in his hometown. Mississippi Wrestling Foundation, they brought a crew up. So Mississippi, one of the few states that does not have sanctioned wrestling. Presbyterian brought a good crew. But the story of the tournament and the fans that are driving women's college wrestling right now, North Central brought an amazing crew. If you've ever been to a D3 NCAA championship, you know it's a different kind of energy. It's a different kind of fan that comes into the arena, and they brought a full crew of people for North Central. And when you come into the Lion's Den, the Hornet's Nest of the University of Iowa, and you rattle them a little bit, and they don't like it. And I love that. If you don't come away from a national championship upset at someone or a crowd or a fan base, then you haven't done your job. North Central did that. They rattled their cages. That's what you want. That's what women's wrestling needs. If they didn't have the North Central fans in attendance, it would just be all Iowa cheering for their team. Kudos to North Central for showing up not only in the tournament, but bringing fans there. You watched from home. What did you see?
Well, Kyle, I heard a lot of that going on in the background. Unfortunately, I wasn't there like you were, so I didn't really get to be in it, but you could hear it. And, in general, wrestling fans can be pretty fanatical and go at it a little bit, but it's pretty much in a respectful way. And nobody's throwing beers on each other like in a football game. And, you just talk about passing away. I would like to mention, unfortunately, one of our former senior world team members, Abby Nettie, lost her father, and that was sad to hear. So our thoughts and prayers with her. Abby's a great person, and hopefully she'll get through it. Tough time, but I just wanted to mention that. Yeah, and the tournament was great. It is a great environment. And, I think I was like holy land as far as wrestling goes. But it's I heard them cheering, and they made a very competitive tournament. I had the big guns, with Kilty, Blaze, and Welker, but it was a really exciting tournament, and people came to wrestle, so it was great experience.
When you say that, the interesting thing is there was no question that the University of Iowa was going to win. Anyone who followed it knew that when you had that powerhouse lineup with those senior world and Olympic medalists. But it was interesting. After the first day, North Central led by 3.5 points. So the fans that don't follow, and you're a University of Iowa fan, you're squirming in your seat a little bit, and they're asking questions. And you look at the scoreboard and you see a back and forth, and it was McKendree, and you see Iowa, and you see North Central, and it's hopping back and forth until, of course, the Kilty, Blades, Welker get in the mix, and then they just take it away. But it was fun to see the back and forth and the competitiveness, and that's what you like because the North Central fans were so consolidated. You really saw them, and they were unified. That was the special part, is that they remind me of the Iranian wrestling fans. That it didn't matter if you're winning or losing, they're invested in what's going on, and they knew where the consolation matches were. They were so into it. So kudos to North Central for bringing a great crew. That really made the environment what it was in the Women's College Nationals.
Yeah, and that's a pretty strong comparison because anybody that's ever been to a world tournament, Olympic tournament, a World Cup knows that the Iranian fans are, the best, pretty much. They really have a high level knowledge of the sport and are fun to be around, actually. Yeah, and if you look at it, Iowa came away with three national champions. Kilty, Blades, and Welker, which surprise, surprise, as you and I talked about at the beginning, we're going to win. They weren't ranked first at the beginning. You and I talked about evidently there's some nuances of that. We could get into a side discussion at some point that only matches evidently for rankings count if they happen in women's college. I don't like that because I think if two women wrestle, whether it's at the Bill Farrell or international tournament, I think those results are real. They're in freestyle and they should matter. And we all knew with the accolades of those athletes that they were going to win. But those are the only three that won, and it still didn't matter. One could argue that at the lighter weights, you and I spent a lot of time talking about the tremendous depth, and Iowa didn't have a finalist until Macy Kilty. And a lot of the athletes were upset. Some of them, came back to take third and fourth and did well on the backside, but they, to our surprise, didn't have a finalist in those lighter weights. So, but it didn't matter. They still won, but it was a fun competitive tournament. It'll be interesting to see, what the format is when it moves to the NCAA. I think this is a great placeholder situation to bridge that gap to the NCAA. Still weird to me to watch freestyle with headgear, and I'm sure it'll be the same in the NCAA. That's one of my little complaints. I don't really like it, but it was a great tournament, and North Central did a tremendous job. A lot of we'll go through the weights at some point, but just a lot of really game on physical wrestlers across the board in this tournament. And you and I talked about this, Kyle. It's almost like it's its own sport. It's not folk style. It's not international women's freestyle. It's like domestic women's college freestyle. Is kind of just different. It has a different feel, and it's like a different sport.
It does, and the execution's different, and the feel, and it's maybe a little bit more physical and how you execute it because the girls are coming from the folk style background, so they're approaching it different, but it has a different vibe, and it doesn't feel like you're in an international tournament. And some of that could be just how you execute it too, that even if you lose it anywhere in the tournament, you can wrestle back, and it takes someone pulling you through at an international tournament. So there's just a lot of nuances and different things that are in play with a college system like this. And so we saw that play out. But let's go
Yeah,
to a mailbag because it feeds into what we were going to talk about with the weights. This question was after
sure.
the last show, and this feeds into 103. Any idea why Olivia Shore of Otterbein was not seated number one at the National Collegiate Women's Wrestling Championships? And he went on to just give his case for why she should be number one. Well, it turns out he was right about this. I still say, based on some of her body of work and just lack of competition, so to say, she should not have been number one. But Olivia Shore said that she wanted to prove people wrong, and she did. And she went out and had a great tournament and won her second championship, won it in 2022, then again in 2025. So she said she was being slept on.
Been out for 2 years. A lot of people have been sleeping on me, but I'm excited to, I'm healthy, I'm happy, and I'm ready to roll.
And she's now a champion, and she deserves her due.
I wouldn't say I slept on her because personally, because we talked about it. I've watched Olivia Shore over the years when she won her first NCAA title, when she wrestled with Fargo, and she's a competitor and a hammer. I think she was appropriately seated based on recent body of work and number of matches. And I didn't know, where exactly she'd be. I didn't get to see a lot of matches this year, and the exact reason she won in a tough weight class is, she's got a lot of grit. She's strong. She's a competitor, and she's just has that like senior kind of feel to her. And if you watched it, she won those matches on grit, strength, determination. You know, is she the best technical wrestler? I'm not saying she's not good technically, but there are other good, very good technical wrestlers in the weight class. But she's just tough and a lot of grit, and you could see her like in her celebration after. It was like a combination of like happiness, kind of relief, and like kind of justification, kind of just like, you know, like I could do this again and I wanted to go out kind of on my terms. So kudos to her. In a tough weight class, she did a great job. So I stand by. I'll agree with the seating, but I wasn't counting her out. And I'm not. I didn't know which exactly what version, but the version we saw was national champ version Olivia Shore.
And so much of what was in my head going into the season, not that she couldn't get on the podium, was that she was at McKendree last year, had an early match, and I think she got concussed and didn't look great in that match. It was a back and forth. So I just was wondering how effective she would be in a long tournament like that. But kudos to her. She absolutely proved everyone wrong and came out of the weight class that we were talking about that was the deepest from top to bottom. It was 10, 12 deep, and she comes out and she's the champion twice. So nice run for her and nice win for a program that's an upstart program. So kudos.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, the theme of the finals is the youth movement was put on hold. It was the veterans, it was the women that won the championships top to bottom. And we can start with Olivia Shore, but on up the line. A lot of those young wrestlers that we saw during the season, high school wrestlers winning, freshmen winning, it got put on hold. It was womanhood 101, and you saw them impose their will throughout the finals. No freshman won a championship, and it was just neat to see how these women went out there and imposed their will top to bottom.
Yeah, and I think it's a combination of opposing their will on different levels. You know, number one on just kind of being able to embrace the moment based on experience, having been out there, maybe wrestling to their best ability, um, you know, technique. But I think the theme to me, and especially in the lighter weights, was just the physicality, the experience. They're like women, you know, and there is a difference, and it's physical. As I said earlier, I don't know how to exactly put my finger on it, but the domestic women's college freestyle is like a very physical style. And, you know, you listen to the commentary throughout the tournament, they were talking a lot about the Russians and this and that, you know, the 2-on-1s. And, you know, I don't necessarily think it's great that everybody's doing Russian 2-on-1s and pushing each other all over the mat. But what you saw was when there was engagement, whether it was collar ties, holding position, not giving up takedowns, you know, whizzing hard off doubles. It was just it's a very physical style of wrestling when you're not in those grabby moments. And I think the experienced older wrestlers exerted their will for sure.
Although she's still young-ish, Kylie Welker, to me, was the most dominant, most impressive wrestler of the tournament. There were times that I wanted to be locked in on that match, and I had to have my head on a swivel because it would end so quickly. She looked so good, so dominant, imposed her will top to bottom from round one until the end. Actually, probably her worst match was the round one, and then she progressively got better. Kylie Welker was the cream of the crop at the tournament this year. I thought she was the best wrestler in the field.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of good ones, but she certainly dominated. I don't think it was necessarily the strongest weight class, but it wouldn't have mattered. I mean, I blinked a couple of times and missed two of her matches that I had to go and watch after, which didn't take that long to catch up with, only a few seconds. But Welker is the mix, as we talked about. She's exceptionally physical, very athletic, and she started as a lightweight. You know, so she moves very well, and yeah, she just utterly, you know, dominated as part of, you know, Murder's Row. But Wrestle Great Tournament, I believe it's her second title now, so she was there last year as well. But you know, I don't know what to say. You know, I mean, I'm expecting, you know, senior world championships from her.
And there's a reason that she was Iowa's first recruit, first commit. That's the reason that you build your program around that. And she is showing why that would be a wise move for the University of Iowa to bring her into the fold and be the leader and establish the program. So she's doing everything they thought she would do. She's as advertised. Really, not much you can say other than she's great.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. Yeah.
What else can you say about Macy Kilty, Kennedy Blades? Probably the same thing. They're just at a level that's way, way higher than the rest of the college athletes that were present. Not sure you can say much else than what you said about Kylie about those two.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'd say you take Kylie and you put those two in. That's, to me, a separate tier. This is like the world medalist, Olympic medalist tier, and that's its own thing, and they just dominated as expected. I mean, Bellamere is in that probably will be in that tier of MMA, and she has not wrestled long and is very much a competitor and very physical. I mean, she never really threatened to win that match against Macy, but she, made it an annoying, fight for your life almost, and I can't, I love watching Bellamere wrestle, and I can't wait to watch her fight. And she's a competitor. Macy controlled the match, and I'm sure that wasn't a match she wanted to have because it's not a fun match. You're literally in a war. But those three are in their own category, and then we have, you and I have talked about this. I don't want to get, utterly get into it. And then you have like the kind of age group world medalist kind of tier, the Mortimer, Janiak, Amani Jones tier. And then you just have the competitors, and I'm leaving people out, in that, maybe Lara Mendes in that tier. But it's its own kind of, there are tiers to this, but that is an elite tier that it was like, next issue. We knew they were going to win. We said that, forever. And, to another mailbag point we had earlier about, what's the right number of athletes for this tournament? Like basically through the first two rounds, it borderline was barely any upsets in the tournament. There maybe one or two. And it really went utterly chalk for two rounds, which just tells you then that you have athletes that are getting in those very hot, low seeds that don't really have a chance to win. So I don't know what number they're going to do. It might be 16. If they do 16, I'm fine with it, but please do 2 or 3 wild cards, just because there will be athletes that are top 8 that may not then qualify depending on the region.
Also on that mailbag, another question was, and we got it beforehand, how do you see Sakamoto and Brianna Gonzalez going? It ends up in a consolation semifinal match, and there's so many layers you can talk about with this weight class where Yu Sakamoto ends up losing in the quarterfinals to Carissa Turnwall, and we didn't see that coming. That was a wild match that comes down to the end, and it just looked like Yu Sakamoto was gassed. And we talk about that different style of international to collegiate because it was more physical. Is it possible that she got worn down by that? Was she in shape going in? Did she deal with injuries? I don't know. But Carissa Turnwall absolutely took the pace to her, and she didn't want the smoke at the end there. And it looked like they could have challenged. She could have gotten a break, and she said no. And then she kept wrestling, lost that match. So in a Consi semi, I didn't know how she was going to do. You could see her doing the semi slide. She ends up getting third, beats Brianna in that Consi semi match, and then beats Turnwall for third place. Ends up in a tough match and then ends up teching her. And then Claire Bowie ends up beating Brianna Gonzalez in the semifinals in what is an interesting match because it came down to activity clock points. And it was a wild, wild show. Won by Sydney Petzinger, who, again, as we talk about established stars, Petzinger has been on the scene for so long. Second, fourth, gets the title. I think she was the most excited out of anyone to win that championship. You could just tell it was relief, excitement. Her parents were excited. So great job by her. But 117, it was the Wild West in that weight class.
Yeah, I'll start, with Petzinger. Great job by her. Great final match against Claire Bowie, who wrestled a great tournament. The Gonzalez match was a very interesting match, exciting match. She wrestled very well tactically. I'm going to say the thing with the Sakamoto match, where I'd like to think I have some understanding of the sport and watch a lot of it. I've never been more confused in trying to understand what's going on in my life. It is not, winning a U23 world title is exceptionally difficult. And I don't care what your weight class is, whatever. It is a senior tournament. It's considered. It is a badass tournament. You win that world title, you're good. It's flat out. And Sakamoto is very good. I think it was a case of I don't know, but that Turmoil is a fighter and a competitor, and I don't think Sakamoto's expecting that in the quarterfinals. And and she had that loss early in the year that she had been. So I don't know if she's used to the American style. I don't know if it's a injury, a conditioning. I don't know, but I would have pretty much almost bet my life, just looking at accolades and history, that she would have, advanced to semifinals there. And and Turmoil wrestled a, very competitive match, throughout the match, like she believed she could win, and, and I don't really know all that much about her, but she's a scrappy fighter. And at a tournament like this, you better be ready to go. And if you're not, you're going to lose. And there was a point where Sakamoto was like half out of bounds in her shoulder. She's like tapping out, like accepting the fall. And then they just put her back, in the center, and didn't challenge it and lost. But kudos to her that she came back and took third and had to beat Gonzalez and avenge the loss. So I'm still confused. I still don't know what really happened, but it was a great weight class. In the mailbag question about how they would have done, I kind of would have probably said I would have thought Sakamoto would win, and it would be a very competitive match, which is what it was on the backside.
Competition 110, it was the best weight class. 103 was the deepest, but the top tier at 110 was the best. Sage Mortimer wins in the match of the finals, 11-7 over her former teammate Samara Chavez. One thing I want to say about Sage Mortimer that I saw was that she is a wrestling savant. She studies the sport. She understands the sport. She reads the rule book. You can just tell that even in a match where she knew the rule going out of bounds and she told her coaches, I want you to challenge it because of continuation.
That was a good challenge.
I'd say, yep. I think she argued that to her coach. She was like, I know I didn't step out first. And
yeah, it must be good for a lot of reasons. The details being one of them. It's basically she's a professional, and the way she wrestled a very aggressive style. Moving forward, very good mat awareness, how to cut the mat off when she's moving forward to try to control center and get step out points. And I'm glad we got to see the match again. You and I have talked about this match. We both love Samara Chavez. She's a great wrestler. When those two go at it, I mean, Steiner was commentating on it. It was good to have Coach Steiner do the finals commentary. And, he was making comments like, I promise you there's going to be more points. This match is not ending with that score. And when those two wrestle, they go at it and they get in great positions. They both take risks. They both might take too many risks, to be completely honest with you. As they keep moving up levels, there's times where they might need to be a little more calculated at times, but it is fun to watch them wrestle. We're big fans of Mortimer. We like them both, and it was the match of the finals for sure. And, I could watch that match forever. It's just fun to watch. So, in a very, may not have been as deep down to 8 as, 101, but that bracket, 5, they were, you go down to Gonzalez, the top 5 are just absolute accoladed, successful wrestlers.
Yeah, look who you had. Kendra Ryan, you had Ava Bayless, who was a returning national champion, Emily Gonzalez, a returning national champion, Sage Mortimer, returning finalist, Samara Chavez, returning 2-time finalist. Kendra Ryan has been right there in the mix. She's a 4-time All-American. So top to bottom for those 5, it was the deepest weight class 5.
Yeah, and that Ryan Gonzalez was just a phenomenal quarterfinal, So, yeah, I mean, it was a fun way to watch.
Amani Jones is a crucial piece of the success of North Central. She's been part of that team championship in 2023, 2 runner-up finishes the last 2 seasons. She wins her 2nd NCAA championship, NCWWC championship, and looked pretty good. Maybe not the most dominant finals match. I think she probably could have pulled away a little bit more, but Amani Jones has a career she can be proud of, undefeated this season, defeated someone who had defeated her last season, and then we had a 6-5 match with her early against Shelby Moore. Felt like she wrestled the match she needed to get her 2nd title.
She's 2-time age group world medalist, very smart competitor. But Shelby Moore is a very technical wrestler. She spent time in the EAP program at the Olympic Training Center. I know my daughter's wrestled with a lot when she's there. And Shelby Moore is a student of the sport, takes it very seriously, keeps very good stance and position, doesn't really do many stupid things. So she's hard to just get out of position and hit big moves on, and I think that's where, Jones was very kind of methodical and tactical in the match, didn't take unnecessary risks. When she scored, she then kept in good position. And Moore is kind of an athlete that's hard to open up, and she's also, you don't want to be sloppy and give up a stupid takedown because she's got a very good leg lace, Moore, and you don't really want to get caught underneath because you could be dominating a match and the match could end. So, I think Jones respected her. I think there was a little bit probably of hey, I'm going out here. This is it for me. I want to go out strong and not blow it. So there's probably some nerves, and I liked her in her interview. She seemed very relieved. You saw her smile a couple of times and make some jokes there, and I definitely felt that it was important to her to go out and win this tournament. And there was a sense of relief.
Because I'm a big John Smith fan, I love her style. She's low singles, uses the angles, and if you can take something away from your opponent, because she said she's not that strong, so you have to wrestle in a different way. That's what I like, is that you have a place for everyone and different styles, and so she has that long, lanky style, and she was effective. As we said, two-time age-level world medalist, two-time NCWWC champion, three-time finalist, four-time All-American. She's had a good career.
Yeah, and what she's also really good at, understanding her body type, is there are many situations where somebody, has a leg attack, and if you don't finish clean immediately with her and you get extended at all, she's so good at reaching over, getting her hips down, and then, cutting corner and stepping over leg and getting it to be her takedown. So, you can't really get away with mistakes on her. So, congratulations to her for a great career.
Lexi Janiak gets it done by the skin of her teeth. She had controlled the match, and then right at the end, Sarah Sterner throws a headlock, desperation headlock at the buzzer. It looked like it could be 2 or 4. It was called 2. North Central wisely challenges the call. They thought it was 4. We went back and forth. At one point, it's like, I guarantee that's 4. Then you look at it, I'm not so sure it's 2. She wins the match and gets her first championship after placing second as freshman and third last season.
Yeah, I'll get to the final match in a second, but I just want to backtrack, along that bracket. So you saw Victoria Torres had a very good tournament, took out Daney, who was, undefeated with infinite pins or almost every pin. And then you saw that there was a little limitation, it's hard to, if you don't get on top, she pin people with bars, and you could watch her through the bracket that it's a different level, I believe, than what she was wrestling, with 25-0, 24 falls. And Victoria Torres did a good job teching her in a technical match. But kudos to Daney. She had a good tournament, came back on the backside. And Torres gave Janiak a match. Didn't really threaten her, but Janiak won a close match 3-1. So I would say the final match. Sarah Sterner had a great tournament. Beat Skaznicki in a match with very similar styles, kind of body type wise in the way they wrestle. But Sterner has a very good arm spin, and she didn't score on Janiak. Janiak's pretty good at defending the arm spin, where she just kind of clamps on it and is able to hold that position and not let the head pop out. But Sterner has good arm spin, good headlock. Didn't give up at the end. It looked kind of hopeless, like the match was over. And at first I thought it was 4. In hindsight, I think it was the right call. And Janiak got screwed in the Junior World Championships in the semis in the worst goal in the history of wrestling, where after the fact, they went back and said that she was fleeing the hold and awarded the match to Italy, which was literally, in the history of the sport, may have been the worst call ever. And she got screwed. So this would have been really tough if they changed that to a 4. I'm sure, I guarantee the refs had no clue that ever happened. So it's not like they were doing a payback, but I don't know how she would have handled doing that. I just snorted. That's how kind of I'm laughing at it. But I don't know how she would have handled that. And she kind of made a little joke about it in the interview, like I've been here before. And it was I didn't want to see her get screwed on a very close call. But I thought Sterner wrestled a great tournament, and this was a good weight class.
Katie Lang wins her second championship. She won one in 2023 for Augsburg, redshirted last season, then goes to upstart Grand Valley State, coached by her former coach, Jake Short, who took the job. And she, you want to talk about MMA, she went out there and she was punishing. She just went out there and imposed her will the entire finals match and looked good the entire tournament.
She's a savage, and she just dominated. We talk about the youth movement, and Jaffe is a freshman, very good wrestler. Kind of, really marched her way through the bracket, dominated, and Lang just imposed her will, is what I would say. And in the quarters, NAIA Estrella lost to Paige Wermeister in an upset 8-7. Lang just dismantled Wermeister, and then took care of business in the finals. And I remember first seeing her, I think it was at the Junior World Team Trials, and I didn't really know her, and then watched her upset. Might have been Ashlyn Ortega. I could be wrong. I recall that she beat somebody who had theory had more accolades at the time, in her best 2 out of 3. I think that's who it was. Well, I'm not sure, but she's very physical and very intense and did a great job. And then credit NAIA Estrella, who I like a lot as a wrestler. And I like the way she handles herself. Came back in the backside and took care of business to take third place. So good for her. It was good to see that.
McKendree had a good tournament. I thought they overperformed what they would do coming in. They sent the most finalists to the National Collegiate Women's Wrestling Championships, had 5, only had 1 champion, but only when you're matching up against some of these quality wrestlers. Tristan Kelly moved up to 207. She was clearly undersized. Tristan Kelly, who had placed third 2 previous times, 1 for Colorado Mesa, 1 for McKendree. She finally gets the title.
I think her only loss this year was to Welker, as you and I talked about. And I thought Fowler looked really good, to tell you the truth. Marching through the tournament, she moved very well. She's a very good wrestler. She had somebody who's very talented as well, and they both have a lot of accolades. And back to the McKendree point, they wrestled a very good tournament. In the finals, they didn't get as many wins, but just to push those athletes through, a lot were upsets. Shelby Moore, I thought, had a very good tournament, looked very good. Jaffe, and it was a good tournament for them as a team. And I'd say the one theme of this tournament was, obviously Iowa won, but nobody handed it to them. There were a bunch. It was the very, you had a first year team placing in the top 5. You had McKendree and North Central wrestled a phenomenal tournament. So this is a competitive tournament. And, I'm going to say this was talked about a little bit as well. And I think, in the finals, Coach Steiner was talking about this with Sally, where let's not separate Division 1, 2, and 3 so fast, and we can go into this. I mean, what North Central did, they're a Division 3 team with no scholarships, barely any resources, and a bunch of, a good coaching staff and the will to succeed. And for right now, we need to keep this competitive with teams like that. Ultimately, maybe when the sport grows more, it can be split up, but that would be a tragic mistake in the near future. I think for the next foreseeable future, at least 3 to 5 years, let's keep this all together, at this level. And then if it keeps growing and we have the ability to separate it, but right now, Division 2 and 3 teams, they're competitive, and it's really not even fair, and they're competitive. So I think it's something we should really analyze and make sure they don't make a mistake in rushing a separation.
And what a great storyline with North Central. And they took their losses. They had a national champion lose early. They had a national finalist lose early. So they didn't have a perfect tournament either, but overcame that and sent 4 to the finals, had 2 champions, and ends up getting second to the powerhouse Iowa team. But Joe Norton never qualified for the D3 NCAA championships, going against a team that has 3 senior world medalists, has a team with 2 coaches that have won Olympic medals and a world title in Clarissa Chun and 6 world and Olympic medals between Tanya Verbeek and what she's done. So that's a powerhouse coaching staff. They have 3 full-time, and you have Joe Norton, who's going to turn around and be an assistant coach with the men's team. He's a double coach, and so he can't focus his entire time as the head coach just to the women. He's got to do 2 programs. You can't say enough about what he's done there at North Central. It's amazing.
Yeah, you can, and it's done a tremendous job. I mean, that's not to take anything away from like saying, has Iowa had a great season, winning their second national? Yeah, it's McKendree, but it's like almost a David and multiple Goliath situation, as you and I talked and use that analogy. But and as you said, he didn't even have every athlete like live up to their seed or not lose. But in a tournament like this, unless you have like the murderer's row of the 3 world medalists, people, seeds don't really matter all that much. People get beat, and you can still have a great tournament as a team and have a number 2 seed lose early. I mean, it's going to happen. It's just the way, again, back to this point of like it's its own kind of sport. This is like it's very physical. It may not be, all the athletes may not be the most technical, but they are all, they wrestle 50 matches a year. These are battle hardened fighters that go out there and want to scrap. And I think that, I don't know how used to that. As great as Japan is, I don't know if they're wrestling 50 matches a year. I know they're not, in fact, and they may wrestle 50 practice matches a year, but they're not making weight, and banging out with people that want to rip your head off. And they may be sloppy, but they don't care. And, and there are themes, there's a lot. I'd like to see, there's a disproportionate lack of leg attacks. There's too much tying up, too many 2-on-1s, and to get better, I think there needs to be a little bit more balance on the attacking side, less grabbing, but it's kind of, they're coached almost to kind of, that's how you slow a match down. If it's somebody's maybe better than you make it a war, like a physical battle.
So, Scott, to recap, the University of Iowa wins its 2nd straight National Collegiate Women's Wrestling Championship, followed by North Central, who placed 2nd last year. They also won in 2023. McKendree places 3rd. They won championships in 2020, 2021, and 2022 under Sam Schmitz. 4th place was upstart Grand Valley State University. King University places 5th, and Presbyterian, another D1 program, places 6th. Let's talk about King University for a minute. I think this is the end of the line for that program. They have not hired a head coach. Don't know what the future is going to be with some of those athletes, if they're going to stay, if they're going to transfer out. But it feels like that program is on the decline. I think you had this perfect storm of great athletes coming together. You had some high-level competitors, Claire Bowie. You had Samara Chavez. You had Anya Drury. You had Kibblebeck. You had Zuniga. Top to bottom. Plus, that doesn't even include some of the injured athletes and some of the ones that redshirted. DeCunio, yeah. So there's a lot at stake there. I think the storyline going into next season for King is what happens. Who are they going to hire as a coach? Will it stay relevant? I don't see it happening at this point unless they make a rock star hire. I hope they do, because it took Jason Mormon years to build that up into a national power. And it's a tale as old as time, Scott. Within a snap of a finger, it can be demolished just like that.
Yeah, I hope, Kyle, that's not the case. I think there are good hires out there, and somebody that could make the program, keep it. I think under the circumstances, I think Gracie did a good job. It's very difficult to walk into that, a top program in flux, in a kind of a crisis mode. It would be really tragic if they don't, put some resources into it and make a decision either way. But you and I, it goes back to one of the earlier episodes. The longer you wait, the more chances are for people to make changes. Maybe if you bring the person in and then, convinces the athletes of a vision or whatever. But once you wait and wait and wait, it just creates uncertainty, and uncertainty is not good.
Iowa went 15 for 15 on All-Americans, so that's an impressive stat that they were able to send 15 to the national championships and come away with 15 All-American awards. That's big time when top to
Yeah.
bottom you have a team that's able to just perform and get on the podium. That's not easy.
No, and I also think, there were probably, not probably, they're absolutely, but from the athletes themselves and the coaches and the fans, I'm sure there were higher expectations in those lighter weights to have athletes make it into the finals and contend for titles. And when they lost on the front before that, to come back and take third, fourth, some of the third, fourth best were Iowa. I mean, so, you know, um, it's very hard to win in the backside when your dream has been shattered, and it shows a lot of character. And I think, that's a tribute to the athletes and the coaches as well to be able to, keep their head in the game. And as Tom Brands would always say, you get the next best thing, what's in front of you. So you're not changing what just happened. All you can do is control what's in front of you and go get the next best thing you can. And I think they did a lot of that, which is good.
With the King scenario happening, so if King is out of the mix, and they certainly were, you knew they were going to be pushing for a championship. Although they could have early in the season, it looked like they were maybe the second best team, pushing Iowa a little bit at the end of the year. It just didn't materialize that way for a variety of reasons. But with the resources that North Central's up against, Iowa's resources just pulling away, I think slowly you're going to see that gap unless things change and you get more Power 4 programs in the mix, unless you get a Lehigh. We'll see what Jason Moorman can do at Tarleton State if they become fully sanctioned Division I. They're a club program right now. I just think the gap between those programs and the University of Iowa is going to increase. Grand Valley State's going to be there. They have some resources. Not saying you can't be competitive, but I think it's going to get harder and harder to compete with Iowa the longer this goes.
It may, but you also have to understand what Iowa did. So you had Welker, who's been there now for 2 years, right? But she was, a senior world medalist, and then you bring in Olympic silver blades and two-time senior world medalist Kilty and infinite age group world medalist Kilty. But that's not always there. There's not always three young athletes that delayed going to college and you're just lurking that you can grab all three of them. Either you're going to have athletes that don't go right to college that don't want to, and they're not necessarily, just because you don't go to college right away, they don't just hand you world medals. This was a period where you had these three athletes that were just unbelievable. Or you may have athletes that sign with other teams, especially if you get in a scenario where you don't have, you only have 10 athletes. So you may not have, people that are all signing and going to Iowa. So I don't know if you could just grab three mercenaries that are senior world medalists always. And that might be a unique situation. Iowa obviously is going to have the first kind of dibs at a great high school wrestler that wants to go right to college because they have the resources and or NIL money. But you also can have these situations where, for the sake, Janiak situation or, Mortimer going where you have a special relationship between the athlete and the coach and they want to stay with them. So, I'm not just going to assume the gap's just going to keep widening. I think these things are a little more tricky than they seem sometimes.
It will be tricky. I'm not assuming anything because you have to put in the work and things have to happen. But just in conversations, even with Joe Norton talking about how recruiting got immediately harder as soon as the University of Iowa came into the fold.
It's tough, man. You're right. It's not just that it's a Power 4 school. It's that it's the Iowa Hawkeyes. It's Dan Gable. It's the arena. It's Iowa City. It's everything that they have, right? It's tough. From day one, it was September of 2021 when the Hawkeyes announced women's wrestling, and it was like from day one, all those girls that came on our visit to North Central that we felt really good about. As well, Coach, I'm going to go on a visit to Iowa. Hey, how was your visit? I loved it. They have everything, the bells and the whistles and everything, right? Great coaching, great environment, great alumni support, facilities, tradition. So it's definitely made it tougher. It's an uphill battle now every time. We have the luxury of some of our success to lean on, which we didn't have in the beginning as a D3 school with no scholarships. But yeah, that's always the tough part. You just got to be willing to see that the juice is worth the squeeze because we're going to cost a little bit more money. But I say it all the time. You ask every single girl on our team after her first semester at school, they love it. And usually they're kicking themselves for even taking as long as they did with their decision because they get to see why it's worth it because of the team and the coaching and the academics and the athletic training and everything that we have. That makes it worth it for them.
and how all of the girls are saying, we're interested, but we want to see if Iowa will take a look at us first. So you're talking about a
Yeah.
global phenomenon here in the University of Iowa. This is known worldwide for what this program represents. You had 50,000 people come to an Oklahoma State versus Iowa duel in a football stadium, and worldwide they know about this. It's unprecedented in the history of the sport what they're able to do and what this monster is. So I just think
Yeah.
from a just perception is reality. Like you said, you're going to get the best girls want to go to the University of Iowa. That's all anyone talks about is I hope my daughter gets a look at the University of Iowa and they get to go there. You have the tunnel in the Carver Hawkeye Arena. You're going to get fans. You're going to get to go to football games and a Big Ten schedule. That's all appealing and alluring. So it's going to be tough to overcome that. And with Joe Norton's squad that was senior heavy, he's in a rebuilding phase right now. He's going to have to
Yeah.
develop and he's going to have to utilize all those things that he was able to build the program with. He's going to have to start from scratch a little bit, but
It's
I
a,
can tell you this, it's game on for Joe Norton. He's not backing down.
yeah. I mean, it's not. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be very challenging. Obviously, other Power Four schools join it. It'll ultimately get sanctioned. It'll be more competitive, but again, if they go to only 10 athletes, we've seen it. You and I were talking about specific names. I'm not going to name on the men's side that were, top recruits in their weight class that they're not winning national titles. So if you can only pick one that's going to be your starter and you're rotating, and trying to get, where you don't want to have an athlete sitting on the bench that wants to be able to compete their freshman year, sometimes you don't always guess right. But, you don't have to convince me, though, the allure of Iowa as an Iowa fan. And, that's where, when I was in high school, if I was good enough, I would have wanted to go. And if, my daughter wrestled in college, I would have wanted her to go. Right. So, it is this, special situation for sure.
The sleeping giant in all this is Grand Valley State. They have the resources, they have some funding. You see what Jake Short is doing. He's an exceptional coach. You see what he does in the corner. I think these girls believe what he's doing. He's brought in a great recruiting crop. I think Sabrina Noss, who lost in the finals, I think she has a big upside. I think she improved out throughout the course of the season. I think a lot of those girls improved. So don't count out Grand Valley State and what they can do. They can be that team that pushes that upper tier in the future.
Yeah, I'm not counting anybody out. I mean, obviously, at the moment, Iowa's going to be a prohibitive favorite, but we don't even, it's very hard to even analyze it because we don't really know what landscape we're analyzing and what the structure is going to be. So, I think this was, we're now phasing into the next, development and growth of women's wrestling, where it's now going to be NCAA sanctioned sport. We'll have to see what happens, but I think it's amazing that we got to where we are, and this was a great bridge to that point, and this was a great tournament to watch. I mean, you and I, talked about it all weekend, so it was a lot of fun.
Two other programs I just want to give a shout out to. Presbyterian, the first D1 women's program to add sanctioned women's wrestling. They had a good tournament and they really developed through the season. They brought in a good recruiting class and they proved it out there. Kudos to that program. And then Elmira getting 10th place. That's a Division III program. Zoe Lentz had a nice run. So another D3 program making some noise, getting into the top 10. So kudos to Presbyterian, a D1 program that's really made its way up. Highest placing they've had in Elmira, a Division III program, getting 10th.
Yeah, you and I talked about it. I mean, Lentz impressed me. I watched her matches as she worked her way through the term. She's very tough, and commented to each other that we thought Presbyterian looked very good, and the wrestlers did a good job.
Final thoughts on the National Collegiate Women's Wrestling Championships before we look ahead to the NAIA Championships, which should be just as exhilarating.
End of an era, but exciting tournament. And there was a fair amount of upsets and a fair amount of chalk, but just I think in general, the one theme to me is the level of competitiveness is pretty intense, regardless of ability or experience. You better be ready to wrestle in this tournament with these ladies.
We got what we wanted at the NAIA Championships at 124 pounds. You have them on the opposite side of the brackets, 1 and 2. Cristel Rodriguez, the 1. Katie Gomez of Cumberland's the 2. Let's hope they meet in the finals. This is maybe the equal to what we're talking about, Samara Chavez and
Yeah.
Sage Mortimer. This is the match we need. We need to see this in the finals. This is one that you have to circle and hope we get.
Yeah, I really, we've talked about it. That's my kind of dream match. It's really kind of funny to me. So I would say two of the kind of weaker weights, um, a little bit, in terms of depth and everything. In the other tournament was 24-31, where it's just deep, And here you have 24. The marquee match is at 24, with Rodriguez and Gomez, and I've gone back and forth on that and what I thought, and I guess we'll just hopefully get to watch it if they work their way through the tournament. And then 31, which again was not necessarily the deepest weight class, in the NCWWC, but 31 is a serious weight class in the NAIA. You have Carolina Moreno, who's going for a fourth title. She gets the number 1 seed. And then on the other side of the bracket, you have Adekore from Nigeria and Mota Pettis. And that will be a great match. And then you have another Nigerian, Sarah Savage, is the 4 and 5 seed. So, whoever wins that will get to wrestle Moreno. And, I don't know where Moreno is. I want to really see her wrestle a Mota Pettis, or, I haven't seen her wrestle that many seniors. And then every time I watch her in an NAIA match or a college match, she just annihilates everybody. And it's very explosive with doubles, transitions very well from takedown to turn. So I would love to see her against Adekore, against Mota Pettis. I think there's a very deep weight. Top 5 seeds, very strong.
Glad you mentioned that weight class on the last edition. I had messed up on who XMP Sochi Mota Pettis had defeated in the regional finals and was down 8-0. They're both Nigerians. They kind of have a similar looking last name, and so I made a mistake on that, so apologies to that. But two Nigerians in that 131-pound weight class. Who's going to come on top? If you had to pick who's going to win, right now I think you have to go with Carolina Moreno at this point.
To win the tournament, I'm going to, no disrespect to Moreno, I'm going to go on the other side and say it's going to be either, and again, if we mispronounce the names look very similar and it's not natural for us. So it looks like Adekore and Adekore, I don't really know, but I think the number 2 seed, which is, Mercy Adekore and Mota Pettis, I just have not seen Moreno have a win like against great, Mota Pettis, pinned Ali Reagan. Mota Pettis has wrestled in Final X multiple times. Adekore, I believe, has wrestled on, in the Olympics, and senior world teams and age group world teams. So I'd be surprised if Moreno won, but I want to see. I'll be the first to say I was wrong if she, beats everybody. But it's really interesting to me, and I can't wait to see these matches.
Kolawale up at 145. She started at 138. She has to be the favorite going into that tournament, but the possibility of a match with McBride is intriguing.
All of the 3 McBride sisters were all exceptionally talented. Okay.
110 is also the weight class that we have circled. The possibility of an NAIA Falcon of Life University against Stefana Jelassic of Lourdes. Let's hope we get that in the finals. It was 4-4 last time. Competitive match. You have a returning national champion at 101 moving back up to 110. I think this is behind 124, the one that's most intriguing to me.
It's not counting Paige Morales as a 3 seed. But if Jelassic gets by her, it'll be a rematch of what was a great match. And, NAIA Falcon has not lost. That was the first match really where she's kind of been, tested. She's dismantled a lot of the, women from the WCWWC. So, we both think exceptionally highly of her, and I want to see that match again as well. So there's a bunch of marquee matches that we're looking forward to here in the NAIA.
So potential semifinal match with Emma Bartline of Southern Oregon, then Paige Morales and Stefana Jelassic in the semifinals, if the seeds hold. So we'll see how that plays out. And again, if we talk about how deep 131 is, who have we talked about? Paige Respicio all season, that she is a quality competitor. She's not even seeded.
Random afterthought, but I would not want to hit her in an early round. You know what I mean? We say this every week, and I sound like, a broken record like that. she's had some up and down performances, but her up performances are very, very good. And I would count her out. She's not there again. The number 6 seed Motley is probably is going to hit Respicio, I'm assuming. Let's see what happens in that match. I wouldn't want to hit her, early for sure.
NAIA championships are sanctioned, so make sure you're watching on FloWrestling this weekend. Scott, final thoughts of excitement going into another college championship weekend.
Yeah, I mean, this is tremendous excitement. We've been blessed where we have back-to-back national, tournaments for the ladies. We had the Big Tens and Big 12s last night for the men we got to watch, and then we're going to roll into, after this, U.S. Open's coming up. So, this is freestyle wrestling season, and, I'm like a kid in a candy store. So it's good stuff.